The galaxy was quiet. Too quiet. It had been 2 years since Captain Elias Grant had detonated the Excalibur warhead at the heart of the Erebus hive mind. 2 years since the unstoppable swarm had collapsed in an instant, their monstrous forms vanishing into nothingness. 2 years since the last remnants of the Alliance had drifted in the aftermath of a victory that had cost them everything. And yet, the silence felt unnatural. High Captain Zorth stood aboard the bridge of the Sovereign Wrath, gazing out at the vastness of deep space. The last battle had been fought in a region beyond the known galaxy, a place where the Erebus had gathered their strength, where physics itself had seemed to unravel. Now, all that remained was a dead zone, an empty abyss where the laws of reality still bent in ways they shouldn't. The war was over. So why did it still feel like something was watching? High Captain. Zorth turned, his second-in-command, Warlord Threx, standing rigid beside him. The scars of battle still marred his scaled skin, a reminder of the horrors they had barely survived. "What is it?" Zorth asked. Threx hesitated. "Sensors are detecting anomalies at the edge of the dead zone. It's strange." Zorth's spines stiffened. "Define strange." Threx tapped the console, and the holographic display shimmered to life. "We sent long-range probes into the Excalibur detonation zone last month. None of them returned. But today, one of them did." Zorth frowned. "And?" Threx zoomed in on the probe's final transmissions. Static filled the screen, distorted readings flashing in erratic patterns. Then, for a brief moment, something appeared. A ripple in the darkness, a brief flicker of an unknown energy signature. Then the probe was gone. No explosion, no interference. It had simply vanished. Zorth clenched his jaw. "Play it again." Threx obeyed, but the results didn't change. The anomaly lasted no more than 3 seconds. A disturbance. Something shifting in the dark. It was impossible. The Erebus were dead. Their source had been erased, hadn't it? Zorth exhaled, turning away from the screen. "Have there been any other reports like this?" Threx hesitated again. "Yes." Zorth's claws curled. "How many?" "A dozen. All from the farthest reaches of space. Ships disappearing. Distorted sensor readings. Whispers in comm channels." Zorth's blood turned cold. "Whispers?" Threx nodded grimly. "Voices, patterns that don't match any known language, and in some cases, recognizable transmissions. Distorted, but—" He swallowed. "Some of them sound human." Zorth turned fully to face him, his stomach twisting. "That's impossible." "Is it?" Threx's expression was dark. "We thought the Erebus were impossible once, too." A long silence stretched between them. Zorth turned back toward the viewport, staring into the abyss. He had fought the Erebus, seen what they could do, and he had seen them die, but now something new had taken their place. Something was moving in the darkness. And it was calling them back. The war was supposed to be over. Humanity had burned its homeworld to stop the Erebus. The last remnants of the Galactic Alliance had fled to the edges of known space, broken but alive. The Excalibur warhead had done what nothing else could. It had erased the enemy from existence. And yet something remained, something wrong. High Captain Zorth paced the command deck of the Sovereign Wrath, his claws tapping against the cold metal floor. The reports from Threx still lingered in his mind. Whispers in dead channels, missing ships, anomalies at the very edge of the Excalibur detonation zone. It didn't make sense. The Erebus were gone. They had to be gone. "High Captain," a voice called from the sensor pit. Zorth turned, his spines stiffening. "Report." The technician's fingers danced across the console. "We've received another transmission. It's faint, but it's coming from inside the dead zone. Zorth strode toward the console, staring at the screen. The data was garbled, distorted beyond recognition. But as the technician cleaned up the signal, something resolved from the static. A voice. Faint, broken but unmistakable. Help. Zorth's breath caught in his throat. The bridge crew went silent. Threx's expression darkened. Run it through analysis. If this is some kind of residual transmission from the war, I want to know. The technician worked quickly, filtering out the distortions. The voice sharpened. Zorth's stomach twisted into knots. It was human. This is Captain Elias Grant. I repeat, I am still here. The silence on the bridge became suffocating. Zorth's claws curled into a fist. His voice was barely above a whisper. That's impossible. It had to be a trick. Zorth sat in the war room with his senior officers, staring at the holographic projection of the recovered signal. He had heard Grant's final words before the Excalibur warhead detonated. He had seen Indomitable's sensor feeds as the explosion consumed everything. Captain Elias Grant was dead. And yet... Zorth exhaled sharply. Could this be Erebus mimicry? One of the officers, a grizzled human named Commander Sato, shook his head. I fought the Erebus for years. They never pretended to be us. They consumed. They took over bodies, ships, entire planets. But they never used deception. They didn't need to. Threx crossed his arms. Then what is this? Sato hesitated before speaking again. I ran the voice print through every available database. It's an exact match for Grant. He leaned forward. Exact. No errors, no inconsistencies. Zorth's spines bristled. That's not possible. The Excalibur warhead didn't just destroy him, it erased him. That entire sector was wiped from existence. Sato held his gaze. And yet, the signal is coming from there. A cold silence stretched across the room. Zorth clenched his jaw. He didn't believe in ghosts, but if the Erebus had taught him anything, it was that the universe held horrors beyond understanding. If this was a trap, they needed to know. And if, somehow, Elias Grant was alive, then they had left something behind in the darkness, something unfinished. Zorth exhaled, making his decision. We're going back. The Sovereign Wrath moved through the void like a silent predator, its war-worn hull gliding past the shattered remnants of the Erebus war zone. It was not alone. A small fleet accompanied it. 30 ships, the last remnants of the once mighty Galactic Alliance. Human destroyers, Royan dreadnoughts, Tari recon vessels, and a handful of independent craft that had survived the war by sheer luck. They had all seen the horrors firsthand, and yet they had returned to the place where everything had ended. High Captain Zorth stood on the bridge, staring at the view screen. They were approaching the coordinates of the signal, the Excalibur detonation zone. Or what was left of it. The void was wrong. Even through the reinforced viewports, space itself seemed fractured. The region where the weapon had been detonated didn't look like a normal battlefield. It was emptier than it should have been, like something had eaten away at the very fabric of reality. "Hi, Captain," Threx said from his station. "We're crossing the threshold." Zorth exhaled slowly. "Status?" Threx's claws danced over the console. "Sensors are unreliable. Some readings show total emptiness. Others show—" He hesitated. "I don't know, sir. Like space is shifting around us." Zorth frowned. "What about the signal?" Sato, the human commander, checked his instruments. "Still there, unchanged. Whoever or whatever is broadcasting, they're waiting." Zorth turned to his crew. "Send a probe ahead. I want full scans before we take another step forward." A small drone detached from the fleet, its thrusters igniting as it raced into the anomaly. The bridge crew watched as its data feed streamed in. For a moment, everything seemed fine. Then the screen flickered. The data corrupted. The probe's signal twisted into unreadable gibberish, until it was replaced by something else. A voice, a whisper, laced with static and distortion. "I told you. I'm still here." Zorth felt his blood turn cold. It was Elias Grant, and he was waiting for them in the darkness. The bridge of the Sovereign Wrath was dead silent. The probe's feed had cut out completely, leaving nothing but static. Yet, the voice lingered in their ears, crackling across the comms. It was unmistakably Elias Grant's voice, calm, controlled, the same tone he had used in every battle before Earth was lost. But that was impossible. He was dead. Zorth's claws clenched behind his back. Every instinct screamed that this was a trap, that they were walking into something they couldn't comprehend. And yet, if there was even a chance that Grant was alive, they had to know. "Threx," Zorth said, forcing his voice to remain steady. "Can you pinpoint the source?" Threx shook his head. "Not exactly. The signal is shifting, like it's bleeding through different points in space, but it's strongest at the core of the detonation zone." Of course it was. Zorth turned to Sato. "You know Grant better than any of us. What do you think?" The human commander hesitated. "I don't know." He rubbed his face, as if trying to shake off the weight of his thoughts. "If this were anyone else, I'd say it was Erebus mimicry. But the Erebus never talked like this. And this feels like him." Zorth didn't like that answer. He turned to the view screen, watching as the abyss stretched before them. The detonation zone was no ordinary battlefield. It was an open wound, a place where the laws of physics had been scarred by the Excalibur warhead. No ship had ever returned from its depths. And yet, something was inside. Zorth exhaled sharply. "We're going in." The fleet moved cautiously through the dead zone. Every ship had shields at maximum, weapons primed, but there was nothing to fight. No enemies, no wreckage, nothing at all, just emptiness. And then, a shape emerged in the distance. At first it was difficult to comprehend. The void seemed to ripple, warping around something almost tangible. The closer they got, the more it solidified, until finally the scanners locked on. Sato sucked in a sharp breath. "That's a ship." Zorth narrowed his eyes. Not just a ship, the Indomitable, the massive human warship drifted silently in the abyss, its black armor still intact. No visible damage, no signs of decay. It was as if it had been frozen in time. And yet, it wasn't right. It was wrong. Even looking at it made Zorth's scales itch, like his brain was struggling to process its existence. "This can't be real," Threx muttered. Zorth didn't disagree. The Indomitable had been at ground zero when Grant detonated the Excalibur warhead. It shouldn't be here. It should have been erased along with everything else. And yet here it was, waiting. The comms crackled again. "I told you, I'm still here." Zorth exhaled slowly. "Prepare a boarding team." The boarding shuttle drifted toward the Indomitable, its thrusters barely firing as it navigated through the unnatural stillness of the dead zone. High Captain Zorth sat strapped into his harness, his claws tapping rhythmically against his knee. The air inside the shuttle was tense, thick with unspoken fear. The Indomitable was not just a warship. It was a legend, the last guardian of Earth. The vessel that had led the charge against the Erebus and delivered the final blow. It was also supposed to be gone. And yet, it drifted before them, untouched by time. Zorth glanced at the human seated across from him, Commander Sato. The man had barely spoken since they left the Sovereign Wrath. His eyes were locked on the viewports, staring at the hulking form of the warship as if trying to convince himself it was real. "You all right?" Zorth asked. Sato didn't look away. "I served on that ship once." His voice was low. "For 5 years, before Grant took command." Zorth tilted his head. "You knew him well?" Sato exhaled. "Well enough to know that if he is in there, it's not him anymore." The word sat heavy in the cabin. Zorth turned his gaze forward as the Indomitable grew larger in the viewport. The docking bay loomed ahead, its doors already open, as if inviting them inside. Something was waiting for them. The shuttle shuddered as it made contact with the docking clamps. A loud clank echoed through the hull, followed by a mechanical hiss as the pressurization equalized. Then, silence. Zorth unstrapped himself, standing as the boarding team prepped their weapons. 8 soldiers, 4 human, 4 Royan, each armed with plasma rifles and electromagnetic disruptors in case the Erebus had left. Remnants. "Final check," Zorth said. "No open comms unless necessary, no splitting up. If something moves, you shoot first. Understood?" A chorus of acknowledgments followed. Zorth exhaled and hit the airlock release. The doors slid open with a slow, agonizing hiss. Beyond them, the Indomitable awaited. Dark, silent, waiting. The first step inside felt wrong. The boarding team's boots clanked against the metal floor, but the sound was muffled, like the ship was swallowing it. The lights were dim, flickering in slow, erratic pulses. Shadows stretched across the walls, twisting in unnatural patterns. The air was thick. Not physically, but in a way Zorth couldn't describe. Like something unseen was pressing against them, watching. Sato took the lead, his rifle raised. "Power's still on. Life support's running." Zorth nodded, gripping his own weapon tighter. "Then where's the crew?" No one answered. They moved cautiously through the corridors, sweeping every corner, but the ship remained empty. Not a single body. No blood. No signs of struggle. Just absence. It was as if the crew had simply vanished. Then the whispering started. At first it was barely noticeable, just the faintest hum, like static in the comms. But as they pressed deeper into the ship, the sound grew stronger. "Still here." Zorth froze. "Did anyone else hear that?" The team exchanged uneasy glances. Then a human soldier muttered, "Yeah." We all did. Sato's jaw clenched. "It's Grant, same as before." Zorth's spines bristled. "Number, that's not Grant. That's something wearing his voice." The whispering continued, growing more fragmented. "Don't leave me. The void is endless. I see you." Then the lights shut off. Total darkness. A click echoed as someone switched on their helmet lamp. The beam cut through the void, but the shadows seemed to cling to the walls, resisting the light. A deep, metallic groan rumbled through the ship. And then, something moved. Not in the open, not in their path, but in the walls. A slow, shifting ripple ran along the bulkheads, like muscle tensing beneath skin. The metal itself seemed to breathe. Sato's voice was tight. "That's not the ship." Zorth's claws tightened around his rifle. "Number, it's not." And then, in the pitch-black silence, a voice rang out. "Clear. Director. You shouldn't have come back." It was Elias Grant, and he was right behind them. Zorth spun, rifle raised, his claws tightening against the trigger. The boarding team followed suit, sweeping their weapons toward the source of the voice. The corridor behind them was empty. Nothing. No movement, no life signs. Just the faint hum of the Indomitable's systems, still running in the darkness. But they had all heard it. Elias Grant's voice. The air felt wrong, heavy, as if something unseen was pressing down on them, wrapping invisible hands around their throats. Zorth exhaled slowly. Thermal scans? A Royan soldier checked his visor. Negative. Nothing visible. That didn't make sense. Zorth had fought in dozens of wars. He knew the feeling of an enemy watching from the shadows. But this wasn't something lurking in the dark. The darkness itself felt alive. Sato gritted his teeth. We keep moving. Main bridge is 3 decks up. If we can access the logs, we might find out what the hell happened here. Zorth nodded, motioning for the team to advance. They moved carefully, stepping over rusted grates and past dead terminals. The Indomitable should have been a corpse of a ship, lifeless and abandoned, but its power still thrummed beneath their feet. It was awake, and something was awake with it. They reached the first junction when the whispering started again. This time it wasn't a voice in the comms. It was all around them. Too late. Turn back. I see you. A flicker of movement to the right. Zorth snapped his rifle toward the motion, but the corridor was empty. His heartbeat pounded in his ears. He didn't imagine that. Sato, he whispered. Did you see? A thud echoed through the hallway, loud, directly ahead. The team froze, weapons up. Zorth's pulse hammered as the thudding came again, a slow, deliberate impact against the bulkhead. Then, a single, bloody handprint smeared across the metal, appearing as if from nowhere, and in the dim emergency lights, something stepped into view. The team's breath hitched. It was Elias Grant, or at least something that looked like him. Zorth had seen Elias Grant before. He had fought beside him, knew the hard-set jaw, the sharp blue eyes, the unshakable posture of a man who had led his species through its darkest hour. But this thing? This wasn't Grant. It wore his face, but something was wrong. Too still. Too perfect, like a wax figure carved to look like a man. The Elias Grant thing stared at them, unblinking. Its uniform was pristine, untouched by battle, not a single scar, not a hint of fatigue, just empty. Sato, Zorth muttered. Are you seeing this? Sato's voice was hoarse. Yeah. Zorth took a slow step forward. His claws tightened around his rifle. Grant? The thing's head tilted, a mechanical slowness, like it didn't quite understand the question. Then, in that same perfect voice, you shouldn't have come back. Zorth's spines bristled. You're not him. The thing smiled. Not a human smile. Too wide, too deliberate. Aren't I? The lights flickered, and Elias Grant vanished. The moment he disappeared, the entire ship shuddered. The bulkheads groaned like living metal twisting under pressure. The whispering turned into a roar, 1,000 voices screaming at once, and then the shadows moved. Zorth barely had time to react before something lunged from the darkness. It wasn't Grant. It wasn't anything. A shape, black, formless, shifting, poured from the walls, taking shape as it moved. Not a body, but an imitation of one. It moved like a human, but it wasn't human. Its limbs stretched too long, bending at unnatural angles. Its eyes, if they were eyes, glowed with a faint, sickly green light, and it was fast. Zorth barely ducked as it lunged, the thing's arms stretched like liquid metal, razor-sharp claws missing his face by inches. Fire! The team opened up, plasma rounds ripping through the corridor. The thing jerked, its body distorting as if struggling to hold its shape. For a brief moment it flickered, its form glitching, shifting. 1 second it was a featureless nightmare. The next, it looked like one of their own soldiers. A human marine, his face twisted in agony, his body half consumed by shifting shadows. He screamed. Zorth pulled the trigger. A plasma round burned straight through its chest. The thing convulsed, its stolen features melting away, replaced by writhing black tendrils. Then, with an unnatural shriek, it collapsed into the floor, dissolving into nothingness. Silence. Zorth's breath was ragged. His claws trembled around his rifle. The air smelled wrong, like burning metal and something rotting. Sato swallowed hard. What the hell was that? Zorth forced himself to stand, forced himself to think. It had looked human. For a moment, it had even sounded human. And it had worn a face, just like the Elias Grant thing. Zorth exhaled, steadying his pulse. We need to get to the bridge. Sato wiped sweat from his brow. You think the logs will tell us what happened? Zorth looked down at the blackened remains of the thing that had tried to kill them. No, he muttered. I think they'll tell us what's still happening. And that terrified him more than anything. The air inside the Indomitable was thick, heavy. Every breath felt wrong, as if they were inhaling something that wasn't meant to exist. Zorth led the team deeper into the warship, plasma rifle steady in his grip. Every hallway felt twisted, not physically, but in a way that gnawed at the mind. It was subtle, like stepping into a room and forgetting why you had come in, like walking through a dream that was becoming a nightmare. They had lost 2 more soldiers along the way. One moment, they were marching in formation. The next? Gone. No screams, no gunfire, just erased. Sato had stopped calling their names after the second one. The remaining 6 moved cautiously, barely breathing. The ship's bridge was close. Zorth could see the reinforced door at the end of the corridor, its metal frame warped from battle. If there were any answers left, they would be inside. The whispering had not stopped. So close. We see you. You were never meant to return. Zorth ignored it. He had no choice. They reached the bridge doors. The access panel was dead, but Sato stepped forward, pulling an emergency override from his pack. He worked quickly, his fingers moving with precision, but Zorth could tell he was rattled. They all were. The shadows had tried to wear Elias Grant's face, tried to pretend. But the real question wasn't why. The real question was, had they succeeded? Sato exhaled sharply. We're in. The bridge doors groaned open, and they stepped inside. The bridge of the Indomitable was frozen in time. Every console was still active, their screens flickering with static-laced data. The captain's chair remained in place, perfectly aligned with the main viewport, which displayed the endless blackness beyond. And in the center of the bridge, slumped over the terminal, a body. The team raised their weapons instantly. It wasn't just any body. It was Elias Grant, or what was left of him. Zorth moved closer, his claws tightening around his rifle. Grant's uniform was torn, withered with age, but that wasn't possible. The Indomitable had vanished 2 years ago. His skin was gray, cracked like ancient stone, as if his body had been half preserved, caught between death and something else. And then, in the flickering glow of the consoles, he opened his eyes. Zorth didn't think. He fired. A plasma bolt ripped straight through the captain's skull, blowing apart bone and synthetic flesh. Grant's body lurched, convulsing violently before collapsing onto the terminal. Silence. Threx exhaled sharply. Was that wasn't him. Sato's voice was tight. It wasn't him anymore. Zorth swallowed hard. He had seen what the Erebus could do. They consumed, assimilated, wore the flesh of the fallen. This thing had not been Grant. It had been something trapped in his remains. Zorth forced himself to look away. Pull the ship's logs. Now! Sato nodded, moving toward the terminal. The system resisted at first, its interface lagging, glitching, but finally, a single log remained intact. The last recorded message from Captain Elias Grant. Sato activated it, and Grant's real voice filled the bridge. Log entry 00277. Captain Elias Grant, date unknown. If you're hearing this, it means someone found us. A ragged breath. Static interference. I don't know how much time I have left. Time doesn't work the same way here. We shouldn't be here. None of this should exist. More interference. The sound of metal groaning in the background. When the Excalibur warhead detonated, we didn't die. We didn't win. We broke something. We tore a hole in the universe, and now we're caught between what was and what comes next. A pause. I don't know if I'm still alive. I don't know if I'm already dead. The whispering in the ship grew louder. Zorth clenched his jaw. Grant's voice continued, weaker now. It's not just the Erebus. They were just the beginning, just a symptom of something much worse. A long, painful silence. And then, if you found this log, you need to run. Because if you can hear me, they can hear you too. The log ended, and the whispering stopped. The silence that followed was worse than any sound. Sato stepped back from the terminal, his face pale. What the hell does that mean? Zorth didn't answer. His mind was racing. The Erebus had never been the real enemy. Something else had been waiting behind them. And when the Excalibur warhead detonated, they had let it through. A sharp, metallic click echoed through the bridge. Zorth turned, and Elias Grant was standing in the doorway. Perfect, untouched. His blue eyes locked onto them, and he smiled. I told you, I'm still here. I told you, I'm still here. The thing wearing Elias Grant's face stood in the doorway, motionless. Its expression was too perfect, too practiced, as if it was mimicking a smile rather than feeling it. Zorth's grip tightened on his rifle. The real Elias Grant was dead. They had just seen his decayed corpse slumped over the bridge console. So whatever was standing in front of them, it wasn't him. Threx snarled, raising his weapon. Burn it! They opened fire. Plasma rounds tore through the figure's chest, melting synthetic flesh and scorching the walls behind it. The force should have sent a normal body crumpling to the ground, but Grant didn't fall, didn't flinch, didn't even react. Instead, he kept smiling, and then he took a step forward. Sato's breath hitched. No! The thing's face split apart, not with blood, not with bone, with shadows. The skin peeled back like unraveling fabric, revealing something underneath, something shifting, its form flickering between 100 faces, 100 different versions of Elias Grant, overlapping and collapsing in on themselves. Not real, not a body, a thought given shape. And it wasn't alone. The whispering returned, but not just from Grant. From everywhere. Run! Let us in. You opened the door. The walls moved. The bulkheads of the Indomitable, the very metal of the ship shifted like liquid, forming half-shaped hands, twisting faces, mouths whispering in endless, distorted voices. They had never been alone. And then the lights died completely. Fall back! Back to the shuttle now! The team sprinted down the corridor, weapons firing wildly into the darkness. The Grant thing didn't chase them. It watched, its form warped, flickering in and out of existence like a mirage. They had never been meant to return here. The Indomitable wasn't a ship anymore. It was a wound, a scar in reality where something else had slipped through, and it wanted them to stay. Sato shouted through the comms. Sovereign Wrath, do you read? We need immediate extraction now. Static. No response. No connection to the fleet. Zorth's pulse hammered. The ship was trying to sever them from reality, to trap them here. Keep moving, he barked. They reached the hangar bay, the shuttle still intact. Threx practically threw himself into the pilot seat, slamming the thrusters online. "Get in! Get in!" Zorth took one last look toward the corridor. Grant was still there, standing at the threshold, watching. The ship shook violently, its structure warping, the walls breathing. And for the first time, Grant's smile faded. "It's awake now. You led it back to them." Zorth's blood turned to ice. He lunged into the shuttle, slamming the hatch shut. The shuttle engines roared, the thrusters igniting as they launched from the Indomitable, hurtling toward open space. Behind them, the ship rippled, its form collapsing inward, distorting like a mirage. And then, it was gone. Not destroyed, not left in ruins, just erased, like it had never been there at all. The moment they crossed back into normal space, the Sovereign Wrath reappeared on their sensors. The comms crackled. "Hi, Captain, what happened? You vanished from all systems. 1 second you were there, and then nothing." Zorth didn't respond immediately. He turned to Sato. The human's hands were trembling, his face pale. "You saw it too," Zorth said quietly. Sato nodded. "Grant was never there." Sato exhaled shakily. Number he wasn't. Whatever they had seen, whatever had worn his voice, it had never been Elias Grant. It had been something else, something waiting, something patient. Zorth took a slow, steady breath. "Get us back to the fleet. Now." They had opened a door, and something had stepped through. The war was never about the Erebus. They were just the first infection. The real war? The real enemy? It had been watching the whole time. And now, it knew they had seen it too.